Good morning, Sault Ste. Marie. Welcome to another edition of On Point. I'm Andy Martins for Tuesday, February 25th. We're live on ONTV. We're live on Facebook. And on today's edition, Chris Oldcorn. He's a new reporter. He's got a new show coming up here on Sault Online on TV. We're going to talk about a lot of things with Chris, and we'll do that right after these commercial messages.
This is On TV.
Hi, can I take your order? Hello?
Oh, hey. Wait, what was the question?
Let me guess. One driving high combo, extra baked?
No. Could I get a burger with a side of fries?
Think you're a better driver when you're high? Think again. If you smoked weed, wait at least 4 hours before getting behind the wheel, or don't drive at all if you're new to it, have eaten it, or if you've mixed it with alcohol.
In your home, lighting is just as important as style.
With PowerView Motorization from Hunter Douglas, you can schedule your shades to light up the room. Create privacy, or both, automatically. No hands required.
So your shades will always be in the right place at the right time in style. And it's only from Hunter Douglas.
Imagine knowing about incidents, closures, and roadwork all before starting your trip. Ontario 511 lets you know before you go. You can get real-time information directly from the Ministry of Transportation. Because the more you know, the easier it is for you to go. And spend the time doing the things that matter most.
Welcome back to On Point, Tuesday morning edition, just after 11 o'clock, and we've had some beautiful days, but don't put away those boots yet just yet. It's going to get a little bit cold in the next 3 or 4 days. My guest today is Chris Oldcorn. He's a new reporter, a journalist. He's going to have a new show here on TV, and I just thought it might be interesting for all the viewers to get to know Chris. And thank you so much for coming on the show today, sir.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Now, let's begin with this. Your background, you're from Miami, the Florida area. Why would you give up the Florida sunshine to come to Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario?
Well, I was told it was the Miami of the North, but I'm not sure that it's actually comparable in terms of the weather. But I actually grew up just outside of Barrie, Ontario.
Right.
And I have lived in Miami on and off since about 2012. But to move to Sault Ste. Marie, my girlfriend is taking nursing here in town. So we moved here, and then I looked at a couple of different stations here locally and met with Bruce and came along with both Sault Online and On TV from that. I've also lived in Toronto, and I went to journalism school in London, UK.
Now, how did you end up in the United States in the first place? I've thought about it over the years. It's not easy to get a job and get that green card or the H1N1 visa in the United States. How were you able to do that?
Well, I originally had a sports events company, and I got in on a specific type of an entrepreneurial investment type visa. And I moved my company from Toronto to Miami. Couple of reasons, but the biggest reason was about 95% of our business was in America, and it was just much easier for travel, not having to go back and forth over the border. So a lot of it was a time issue. And then also there was the issue of, it was actually favorable for tax reasons to be in Florida when most of your business is in the U.S.
Right. So in other words, the American government let that happen with you because it's a unique thing that you were doing, and that somebody else there couldn't do exactly the same thing.
Yeah, in the city of Miami, like their economic sort of, we would call it an economic like development here in the Sioux. They have like similar thing in Miami. They have a separate organization, but what it does is it looks at bringing in companies from other countries and locating them in Miami. One of the main reasons is Miami is actually the international banking capital, not New York. So a lot of companies, particularly in Central and South America, will put offices in Miami just simply for banking reasons, and also for it's just very easy to do business, particularly in Central and South America from Miami.
Right.
Just because there's so many direct flights to so many different countries, Miami's a real hub if you want to fly south.
Now, were you kind of leery when you decided to move to the United States and to Florida? Were you leery about the safety? You know, we hear about all the gun crime and the crime in the United States. Did that cross your mind back then?
No, not at all. Miami, where I lived, was extremely safe. I actually lived in a gated community, so there was even added security there. And there are, yes, a lot of gun crime in the U.S., and we see a lot of that up here in Canada on the news, but I never saw anyone even walking around with a gun on their hip or anything like that, and I traveled all over the U.S., including to some states have what's called an open carry law, which means you can actually carry a gun on your hip in a holster, just like a police officer would.
Right.
And even in those states, I don't recall ever even seeing a gun once. The only time I ever really saw guns was when I went into a gun store in Rapid City, South Dakota, and I was just wandering around the town because I was there actually for some meetings with some politicians.
Right.
And I wandered into this gun store and saw all kinds of different guns up on the shelf, but I mean, beyond that, I haven't really witnessed even seeing guns anywhere.
Right. Now, your visa, what you got going into the United States, there was never a time limit on that visa.
You have to reapply every, I think it was 3 or 5 years, something like that.
Right.
But once you already have it, it's just an extension, as long as you're still doing the same thing as what you were doing when you entered the country. And then there's also a few stipulations on, like, I had to have so many American employees and things like that. But it wasn't like it was like, oh, you can come for 3 years and then we're taking it away from you and you'll have to go back and move your company to Toronto.
Right, right.
I found America to be very business friendly, actually.
Right, and let's face it, there's a huge difference between Canada and the United States. We're talking 36 million and 325 million. I mean, you can't compare the two, really. Was that the case in business as well, that you found it much smoother than possibly being in Canada?
Yes, because there's less geographical area and so many more people,
Right.
it's much easier to do events because you can pretty much put an event in any city and you can still draw from, millions of people in the surrounding area. In Canada, if you decide to do let's say an event in Saskatoon, no one from Toronto's coming to that event.
No.
But you could put an event in a city the size of Saskatoon, but the drawing area for that event could be 3.5 million people within let's say an 8-hour drive.
Right.
Whereas if you did that event in some of the cities, like for example, if I did an event in Sault Ste. Marie, it'd be very hard to get people to come to the Sioux, because of the geographical location. Whereas if you take a city and you can plunk it anywhere, I mean, you can put it in Rapid City, South Dakota, a city of only 50,000 people, but just they have a bike rally there every year that brings in over 1 million people on bikes into the Rapid City and surrounding area. It's called the Sturgis Bike Rally. But you don't see any cities in Canada hosting a bike rally with 1 million bikers. It just doesn't happen.
That's right. We can't even, people from Toronto 400 miles away will not come up here for any, they will for overall events like curling and stuff, but not for everything.
Yeah, part of the issue with Canada, if you want to run events, is just simply where everything's located. Like half of the population of Canada is almost in Ontario.
Right, that's right.
I mean, we have 13 million people in Ontario, and we only have about 33, 34 million in the whole country.
Let's call it about 35.
Yeah, so, almost half the population lives in just Ontario.
Let's move on to healthcare. Your top favorite and my favorite topic, comparing healthcare in Canada to the United States. I mean, I don't know if one can even compare the two.
No, there's no comparison. Not at all. It's completely different. And the reason being is, one, it's private, so there's competition. There's really, outside of major cities in Canada, there's no competition in healthcare because you usually only have one choice.
Right.
That's not called competition, that's called a monopoly. And in monopolies, there's no incentive to provide excellent care in something. Because where's the person going to go if you provide them with substandard care? Nowhere. Like if you need to go to a big hospital, the next closest one is Sudbury. So it's a long drive away. Whereas in Toronto, for example, you can drive 15 minutes and get to another hospital. So there is, at least in Toronto, there's some competition in terms of how services are delivered. But locally here, as we can see with the Sioux Area Hospital, there's no competition, and there seems to be very little effort to provide high standards of care.
And they know
based on my talks with dozens and dozens of people that not only work there, but also who have been there for services, shall we say.
And they know that too. They know most people in Sault Ste. Marie will not go to Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan or Petoskey hospitals because they can't afford to do that.
Oh, I agree. I mean,
right.
It's pretty telling that War Memorial Hospital, if you go to their website, right on the front, it says Canadian patients. I mean, that
tells you all you need to know.
That's all I need to know. And actually, when I actually have inquired about getting healthcare through War Memorial as opposed to here in Canada because I can't get a family doctor.
Right.
I'm paying for something I'm not getting. And I think that's a shame. I'll be dealing with that on my first show.
Right.
That if you don't provide people with family doctors, maybe it's time we got a tax credit back because I'm not getting what I'm paying for. And I have a valid reason to be under a doctor's care at all times.
Right.
And I can't get a doctor. And quite frankly, I can't go to the hospital now either based on things that have happened since my first wonderful visit to that facility.
Stay right there, Chris. We'll take a couple of commercial messages and breaks, and we'll be right back after these messages.
It's hunting season, so this is probably pretty stupid, right? Actually, hunting accidents kill somewhere around 2 people a year in Ontario. Smoking kills 16,000 a year. So, what's really stupid?
Welcome back to On Point. I'm Andy Martins for Tuesday, February 25th. We're live on TV. We're live on Facebook. And welcome back, Chris Oldcorn, who's a reporter, journalist. He's got a TV show coming up. He does a bit of everything around here at On TV Online. Welcome back to the show, Chris. Oh, we got Chris there. He's up now. Okay. Chris, I wanted you to give our viewers a kind of a glimpse of what you're going to be talking about. Your show's coming up real soon.
Sure. Well, just before the break, what we're talking about there about healthcare, I'm going to be talking about that, obviously. I'm going to be talking about a specific situation that happened in the hospital that myself and another online on TV employee were able to help with. And then I'll also be talking about family doctors, like for example myself. I need a family doctor for a certain health condition, but I can't get one. So I have to go across the bridge to get a doctor, which, I mean, it amazes me that there's no doctors available at all. And if you go to a walk-in clinic here, you have to wait 12 hours just to get your prescription. War Memorial. Basically, the War Memorial across the way, they have a Canadian patients thing you can click on the site,
right? And
basically they guarantee you're out in an hour and seeing a doctor in their walk-in clinic, which amazes me given the time periods that you wait at walk-in clinics here in Canada.
Now, if you go over there, Chris, what is the cost for somebody going over there from Sioux, Ontario to the walk-in clinic at War Memorial?
I'm not actually sure. I didn't inquire about the actual price, but my guess is it would be somewhere around $150 US.
Really, on anything that you have done there? Or?
Yeah, for a walk-in clinic. Like, I've been to walk-in clinics in Miami for $70.
Right.
And that's $70 American at a walk-in clinic. So I would not think it would be over $150. It might even only be $70 or $80 because you're dealing with a small town that doesn't have the same operating costs as, say, a walk-in clinic would in Miami.
Right, but you have a valid point. My son needs a doctor because of healthcare issues too, and just going into the walk-in clinic, whether it's at the hospital or the group health center, is not the same thing because the doctors do not know you. I've been through that with my son, and you have a valid point that everybody should have their own doctor.
Oh, absolutely. Walk-in clinics are not how you provide health care. It just simply isn't. The only thing a walk-in clinic is good for is if you have a sore throat and you need to get some antibiotics. Right. All other healthcare needs being dealt with at a walk-in clinic are just, it's not how you do it. Right. That's not the purpose of a walk-in clinic. And as a matter of fact, if you look at the American healthcare system, the walk-in clinics deal with things like sore throats or you got a headache, those sorts of ailments. They don't deal with the more serious issues. The more serious issues you go to a specialist for, or a family doctor, which, by the way, there's a ton of family doctors available in the States at any moment in time in any city.
Even Des Moines, Iowa, or Rapid City, South Dakota, you go to cities that are about the same size as Sault Ste. Marie, give or take, but I bet you get better response in those cities.
Well, not only that, but you have competition, so there's not just one hospital.
Right.
And they're competing against each other. And just like anything, when you compete, you have to put a better product out. Right. If there's no competition, there's no reason to put a good product out. Why? I mean, it was like the Leafs when they were owned, or still are owned, but by the teachers. They were owned for so many years, put a horrible product out there, but they kept selling out game after game after game after game, so there was no incentive to improve the team. After they finally actually weren't selling out every game, that's when management was like, uh-oh, we better put a good product on the ice again, and then now look at where they are now. They're spending the right money, putting good players on the ice. It's the same thing for a hospital. If there's no incentive, why bother?
Right. Let's talk about one other quick thing before we move on to the American political scene.
Sure.
In terms of Ontario, you bring the valid arguments with the healthcare. Mm-hmm. This is the same province we are, believe it or not, in Ontario. Mm-hmm. Shouldn't healthcare be the same in all of Ontario?
Yeah, I believe that's what the Health Act says, but it's presently not what is
So based
happening.
on that, is the provincial government failing in the healthcare mandate?
I would think that both provincially, and I think you can hold individual institutions. Hospitals are funded by the provincial government, and then also some from the federal, but they're tasked with providing a certain level of care as required by the health unit.
Right.
And there are certain things that they are supposed to do that they don't do, but who holds them accountable? And I deal with one of those situations on my show. And had I not actually heard with my own 2 ears the situation I'm going to discuss on my show, I wouldn't have believed it. It was that bad. Quite frankly, Stephen King's Misery book made it look like was it like a holiday book compared to what that lady went through. I am completely and utterly disgusted with the individuals involved in that lady's care. I'm not going to be naming names, but I know who the nurses are. I know who was there. And I figured all that stuff out. I won't be naming names on my show, but I will be discussing the situation.
You just have that investigative reporting gene in you that you can see these situations and they have to be brought out.
Yes, and on that, there's actually people in the hospital who agree with me, who work there, even in the administration, who contact me and verify things for me.
Right.
And so it's not like it's just patients contacting me. This is a systemic problem through the whole Sioux area hospital system.
And people of Sault Ste. Marie deserve to know. And Chris has told me the stories, and his show, you're in for a treat because it needs to be called out.
Oh yeah, I mean, the issue I'll be discussing, I'm still dumbfounded that it was even a situation. Like, right. It absolutely amazes me. Like, it's something you can't do to someone in a hospital when they have a specific note about it. When someone carries something in their purse about a certain thing, right, and they show it to you, you can't say, no, we're not going to do it because I'm not paid enough, to quote one of the nurses. And so you have to provide care, and that's just not happening.
Anyway, that's coming up. Your show's coming up real soon, eh, Chris?
Yep.
When will it be aired on TV?
It'll be on at 7 p.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but it'll be starting this Thursday, and then the next Tuesday will be the first show on a Tuesday. And the show will also be repeated on Wednesdays and Friday mornings at 7 a.m., just before the morning show. So it'll be on the 7s on Tuesday and Thursday evening, Wednesday and Friday morning.
Let's move on quickly to the Democratic primary. Bernie Sanders, is he going to be the next president of the United States?
He will never be president of the United States. Too many Americans, when they hear the word socialist, that scares them off. It's scaring the people in the Democratic Party that Bernie could be the nominee, and they have to figure out some way to rob him of being the nominee, as he would have been last time if it wasn't for Hillary Clinton and some of what went on there. But right now it does look like Bernie will be the nominee, and that, I mean, a lot of the Democratic strategists, Carville was just on TV the other night talking about how, the Democratic Party has moved way too far to the left, and they need to learn from, for example, the Labour Party in the UK under Jeremy Corbyn, right, actively campaigned as being a socialist party, and the Conservatives got one of their biggest majorities since Margaret Thatcher. That is going to happen in the US. Trump is actually polling at his all-time high ever right now, and part of that is because there's a good chunk of people in the States who are centrists who will not vote for Bernie Sanders. They might not vote for Trump, but they're definitely not voting for Sanders, so they might just kind of hold their nose and vote for Trump. And there's just nothing. Sanders is getting up saying he wants to blow up the economic system. The U.S. has record unemployment right now for both whites, blacks, and Hispanics.
That's right, yeah, exactly.
And that's a kitchen table issue that people care about. If you don't have a job, then you're interested in changing the political party. But when you have a job and you're putting food on the table, roof over your head, you got a car, you take your family on a vacation, you don't want to upend that for an uncertainty, which is what Bernie Sanders is. Bernie Sanders is uncertainty. And when things are going well, people don't like to be like, well, let's take a chance. I mean, Sanders openly admitted in a debate the other night that millions of people would lose jobs in his Green New Deal.
Right.
Who's going to vote for a candidate that gets up at a debate and says you're all going to lose your jobs? That's not, the people don't vote for that. And that is just simply not a strategy to get votes. I mean, no politician should stand up and say, if you vote for me, you might lose your job. Who's going to vote for that politician? No one. I mean, no matter how wonderful the policies sound, people still care about eating and a roof over their head and sending their kids to summer camp and, you know, putting them in baseball leagues and stuff like that. They don't want to lose their job, and that's what Bernie Sanders is basically campaigning on. And Trump will just rip them apart in debates too.
Chris, our time has run out. Can you believe it? We've had so much fun.
I was just getting started.
We'll have you on again for sure in April. But you're right. I invite people to look at the 1984 results of the U.S. presidential election with Ronald Reagan, and then take a look. And if Bernie runs, he's going to get annihilated. It's going to be...
It will be the same thing that happened to Jeremy Corbyn in the UK. You'll see a massive majority for the Republicans.
Thanks very much, Chris.
Thank you.
And we'll be back to wrap up the show right after these messages.
In your home, lighting is just as important as style.
With PowerView Motorization from Hunter Douglas, you can schedule your shades to light up the room, create privacy, or both, automatically. No hands required.
So your shades will always be in the right place at the right time in style. And it's only from Hunter Douglas.
Angelo, it's me, Vito. Imbecile, your brother! Listen, you bring 10 gallons of flat eggshell or white paint.
This past year, we've been celebrating our 65th anniversary, dating back to services originating in our community in 1954, which is quite some time ago. It's been a great opportunity this past year to recognize the pioneers, the stakeholders that worked tirelessly to create what we are today. I'm grateful for everything that the families 65 years ago and the people that assembled the organization have done in order for us to achieve the success that we're experiencing 65 years later.
This is On TV.
Welcome back to On Point. Thank you very much to Chris Oldcorn. And remember, his show's coming up on Thursday. Chris Oldcorn show right here on TV. Next week, Donna DeSimon and Al Arrington back on Point to kick off a new month of March. We'll see you then. Have a great day. I'm Andy Martins for On Point.